All right, cool. Hey, thank you, Isaac Arthur, for coming on. We were just doing some link sharing. That's what all that chat window stuff was about. Isaac, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this with me because I'm a huge fan of yours, massive fan. I've been a fan for a long time now, but the greatest thing about what you've done is you've inspired millions, but as far as I know, tens of thousands of people at minimum to become engaged with science and to enjoy science and to think big on scientific issues. I just want to say thank you for that public service, that outreach, because we're moving. I think that is moving society in an absolutely positive direction. So, from myself and from the wider community, thank you for all you have done to the contribution of science. Thank you very much. What inspired you? What brushed over your neocortex to do that?
I guess for doing the show was kind of a bit of an accident. I was playing around with PowerPoint presentations, and I decided to just pick a topic I found interesting to work with, just to kind of make an example of a new PowerPoint method I was using. And I turned that into an episode, uploaded to YouTube, and to my shock, people watched it. So I did another, and then just kind of turned into a channel. As for the topics, I was a born and bred geek. I was raised on Star Trek and Doctor Who, so it's always been near to me in my heart. It's what got me going into physics as my major back in college, and well, almost 40 years later now, that's where we are.
And you went to the military, didn't you? You served in the military in Poland, was it?
In Germany originally, and then Iraq. I left grad school in 2003, about halfway through the doctoral program, and I enlisted in the U.S. Army when the war broke out. And I was stationed in Germany, and then up in northern Iraq for a while, then down in Ramadi when the surge started, 2005 to 2007. Then I got out a few years later and basically went into this.
Wow, that's
civic governments.
That's fascinating. So you know all the high tech technology that the government is hoarding back there in secret. You know all the secret stuff. I'm just kidding. They like.
Well, I did work for an Air Force lab for a little while in college, and they did have some secret stuff there. And but usually what qualifies as secret also translates as very boring. So
I'll run with that.
Teflon.
I'll run with that. Hey, so I wanted to ask you a quick question as well. Who is your favorite science fiction author apart from Isaac Asimov? I think that's my guess. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I was actually named after. Well, one of my parents named me after Newton and Einstein. Middle name's Albert. The other parent says I was named after Asimov. And yeah, Asimov is certainly one of my favorite writers. My favorite living author for science fiction specifically is Alastair Reynolds. He writes Revelation Space and some other works. He's very hard science, very, of living authors, folks like Clarke and Asimov having passed away, and Heinlein and so many other great ones. So,
because this is a financial show where we concentrate on the fake financial markets a lot. Philip K. Dick is very big for me. His sort of psychedelic experiences and this whole what's real and what's not, because that's what the markets feel like for me a lot.
Roger Zelazny would be the one I go to. Roger Zelazny and Michael Moorcock from the kind of I can't remember what it's called, second wave sci-fi from the 70s. Very psychedelic type of writing. What is real. His Chronicles of Amber series, A Lord of Light, are the ones for me for that. I usually qualify him as a fantasy writer, though.
Yeah. Jules Verne really got me into a lot of opening light, because it's a very earth-based science sort of stuff.
It's amazing how well it's held up too. I mean, these are over a century old, and I mean there are gaps, changes, but they still hold up pretty well in the sciences.
All right, so this is a financial show, so people come here. They come here to talk about money and power and money and money, So we got to talk a little bit about money to fulfill my contract obligations with the audience. So let's talk quickly about all these space corporations, because we national space. And that's kind of old now. We've had NASA for a long time. The Russians and the Soviets tried it. There's a whole bunch of the European Space Agency, and the Middle East has a lot. That's very old. National space organizations are a very old thing. But we've got a whole bunch of new ones, and they're all coming out of the private sector. It's absolutely booming. And the talk on the town is trillionaires. They're talking trillionaires. They're talking these, we'll get to the moon. or asteroid mining or other things. For example, we've got SpaceX, which is the obvious one. They're making reusable rockets, and Mars seemed possible. You've got Boeing, which is kind of an older corporation, but they're keeping up and they're innovating, which is unusual for a sort of an older corp.
Oh, it's always been pretty good about keeping up with the tech. I mean, or making a lot of the new tech. A lot of the aerospace companies, and of course you got new ones entering the field like Blue Origins. It does occasionally seem like a race of the billionaires who can be the first to really get space going, though that's the kind of competition I prefer. I mean, there was a thought that, we might have asteroid mining. You get that $1 trillion gold asteroid. And you could actually be worth that on paper, but I don't imagine you'd actually send it home all at once, or at least that's the market at once. You wouldn't be able to, smelt it all out that fast. Just because you find $1 trillion worth of gold in an asteroid does not mean you're delivering to Earth the next day. But I think, with commodities specifically, with rare metals, platinum, gold, things like that, yeah, there are trillions of dollars worth of that in the asteroid belt. There's, in fact, many quintillions of dollars worth of it in Earth's crust and mantle. Extraction becomes an issue, and of course, what's it cost to extract? Normally, we find gold and it's so rare that it doesn't matter how much it costs you to extract it because it's still way cheaper than it's selling it for. With those, though, it becomes a bit of an issue. Right now, if we saw a bunch of gold bars sitting on the moon in a valley, it would be economical with modern tech, or even tech from 20 years ago, to go up there, pick up those gold bars, and bring them home and make a profit. But there is going to be a minimum cost in that. You're not going to see gold or platinum inside modern space technologies drop to, aluminum prices, like when aluminum crashed in, what was that, the late 19th century, in terms of just mass production. The material was there, but there's always going to be a limit on extraction. So it'll be more like other metals where the cost is production values as opposed to scarcity. But I don't see a market crash coming out of that, maybe a slow adjustment.
Yeah, like for example, Spain exported way too much from the New World of gold, and they crashed their own. They were using it, and silver, and they crashed their own price, and the empire fell essentially. Mm-hmm. What do you think of Orbital Sciences? Those guys are joining the Orbital Delivery Party. Do you know that company?
No, off the top of my head. Are they the ones doing? No, that postcode is Blue Origins. That is actually a good example. The fact that there are companies out there I've never heard of in the space game is a good sign that things are really moving forward.
Yeah.
I mean, there were always lots of little companies, startups that were doing things for, decades, but they weren't even getting to the prototype phase. Now we've got people actually doing launches where they're not a name, they're not a household name.
Yeah, because
stuff up there.
Because anything that happened in the 1960s, so I think a lot of the older generation will remember this, is it was a big event to have a rocket go up. I mean, the whole world would watch. And now it's 1/3 of the world will watch or something because it's happening quite often-ish.
Still a big deal. It's still not entirely routine, but people don't, race their television sets or pull a lunch break to go catch it. Now, part of that's the TiVo aspect. You go watch it afterwards. But at the same time, that tells you a lot about the market advancing on this. When something becomes passé, when something becomes not such a big deal, that is when it is now a market you want to be getting involved in. And I still wouldn't be saying go invest like crazy in space, but we are getting to that point. We are hitting that tipping point. We said for a long time that when launch costs got to be $1,000 a pound or less, and they're just hitting that now, that's when you start to see the snowball happening. Now, so I would say we already are in that snowball, but the snowball doesn't look too big when it starts rolling down the hill. In another 20 years, it might be the gigantic glacier falling down on the people below. But for right now, it's picking up speed, though. It's a good time to be looking into those things, but I wouldn't be trying to buy, invest your entire portfolio in it.
Yeah, exactly. And if anybody wants to look at the whole space elevator versus rocket propulsion, getting off Earth, go to Isaac's channel because he's got hours and hours and hours of commentary on the two lift mechanisms, and it's extremely interesting. I'm divided on the issue. I think. One other quick question, because we usually look at very long time periods. This is a throw out of the blue. You didn't even know this was coming. I'll hit you for the left here. Do you think there might be a revolt in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years against technology because of the exponential curve, and that a Ludditeism people might revolt because they don't understand?
To some degree, yeah. I mean, we did an episode on techno-primitivism back, and we have to kind of be careful with a lot of these cases where we say that the Luddites have a horrible name, you know. Almost all their activity wasn't anti-technology at all. It was having to do with labor practices at the time. And, of course, labor was always a bit of a tricky topic, but, you know, we're talking about 19th century labor. That was the, you know, the matchstick goals and the, you know, 12 hours, 7 days a week type stuff. So that was what they were mostly complaining about, not really the technology. And even with folks like the Amish, their complaint isn't about the idea that technology is evil. It's that people who, by using it, you're degrading things like family life or whole work values. And I might disagree with that, but, you know, it's not people crashing through the streets, you know, Fahrenheit 451 style, setting books on fire. And we have the same concern now with automation. Now, people say, well, automation could cost a lot of jobs. And say, well, I should hope so. It's going to cost us probably millions of jobs. It probably will create a lot more jobs. And do we know for sure? No. But we do know based on every other previous invention. This is not new stuff. We've been doing this technological disruption thing for centuries now, arguably longer. You know, it was something Rome dealt with sometimes. And, well, you know, we don't have the milkman anymore, but we've got better jobs for people. We got more jobs for people. I don't know what the average unemployment around the planet right now in developed nations is, but it's doing pretty good in the U.S. You've seen some wage growth, and those were concerns that are not going to go away with automation. But there are patches that can be used to fix it. For my part, I tend to think that you'll see economic growth that increases jobs and better paying and better, you know, happier jobs. But even if not, that's when we can start looking into some of those alternative options that get tossed around, like giving everybody a bit of a stock or a bit of a share of what's going on in terms of the automation, UBI, things like that. But if the market can't correct around it, that doesn't mean that we're going to have a population reduced to, you know, random starving source versus, you know, a 0.1% that owns everything. Those are certainly concerns to be addressed, but automation, for the most part, has brought us better life for everybody. And AI, in terms of human-level AI, does kind of change the equation a little bit on that, but at the same time, even that, as we looked at in some of the episodes, is probably manageable without having to go to any kind of extremes in terms of either Skynet killing everybody or massive changes to how we function in society.
The only reason I asked that is because I'm watching this Libra coin, this Facebook coin, and I'm watching people are getting frustrated with social media, I think. Automation as well, but they sort of combine the two into a single thing. I don't know, it's kind of an interesting one. It's a side point. We'll go back to talking about the space. So which should we colonize first, the moon or Mars?
The moon. The moon.
I agree. I totally agree. It's the proximity factor, right?
Well, the best place to start colonization is in orbit around Earth itself. But that works in really well in tandem with the moon. Why we're interested in the moon, though, is twofold. One, it is 2 seconds away communication-wise, and it's 3 days away by old-school Apollo technology. So if there's a problem, you can have a doctor right there telling their flight surgeon exactly what to do. You know, technicians can show up. You can't do that on Mars. It's a good place to prototype stuff. It's also a good source of raw material, because the problem with places like Mars is that, you know, getting a ton into orbit is a lot easier than getting a ton down on Mars. You're going to launch 100 tons of equipment into orbit around Earth and get maybe a ton of payload of that down onto Mars. When you have something like the moon set up, you can start extracting raw materials that you've brought from the moon rather than Earth's gravity well. Not the high-tech stuff. You still make all your chips there, but like your hull plating for your ships, your fuel, you might be able to get those off the moon by some industries there. But the moon, while it's a good source of raw materials, it's more likely to be the orbit of Earth that we actually colonize first. You're probably always going to have a bigger population in orbit of Earth than you would have on the moon or even Mars. You know, Siberia, not that populous compared to, say, you know, England. It's a much smaller place, right? You know, who lives, you know, Monaco, Hong Kong. These are very, you know, they're not very spacious. But of course, the space around Earth is actually much larger than these too. It's huge. The orbit of Earth is where things are going to be most interesting. That's going to be the biggest colonial area. But you want Mars, you want the moon for raw materials. Mars, on the other hand, offers nothing. There is nothing on Mars of value.
The International Space Station is like a Stone Age version of an orbital habitation, right?
Yep.
And
that's the start point, you know.
Yeah. The
Lunar
ISS.
base is good for raw materials. I don't want to knock Mars too much. It has value, but there's nothing intrinsically special about Mars other than its plan to go beyond. We don't really need it per se for raw materials. You got asteroids, you got the moon. For a place that you want to terraform to be most like Earth, Venus is way better. And so while there's definitely a role for Mars and us, and definitely great to have people land there and do all those dome colonies we see of, I don't see any real economic or political advantages to it other than planting a flag. Which is not bad. I mean, the moon, that paid for itself in terms of public enthusiasm alone, but Mars colonies are not the stepping stone for a bold future in space. They're just one of many things we can do.
You've heard it here first, folks. Isaac Arthur is going to war with the Mars Society. It's great. I like it. It's great.
I'm a big fan of their work for that because I think it's important for us to visit there. It's just, to me, it's like going to Antarctica versus going to California 1849. Mars is probably Antarctica. The asteroid belt being California.
That's true. All right, so Drake's equation, for the listeners, what is the importance of Drake's equation? Why don't people understand Drake's equation, and how fundamental is it to all of the science that you talk about?
Well, one of the biggest questions we always have with space is, and this is something kind of came up in the early days of science fiction with people like H.P. Lovecraft. This was an era of science when we were starting to realize just how old and huge the universe is. And we were starting to get aside, in 1800, the vast majority of people, intelligent, rational people, figured the Earth was maybe 10, 15,000 years old tops, because that's as far back as our archaeology could go. And people arrived then, so why would the planet be older than that? When we started to see how old it was and how big the universe was, and this concept of evolution that Darwin had given us, we started saying, wait a minute, with all that stuff out there and with all that time, surely there'd be other things. And there's nothing really all that special about Earth. Some of those things should be older than us. So Drake's equation being how we try to predict the Fermi Paradox, the idea that the universe is big and old like that and should have alien civilizations all over the place. And it's got various factors in it. How often do stars form? How often are planets habitable? And the problem is that we know the answer for a few of those. They're like 1 in 10. But there's some of the other factors, we have no idea what they are. And people tend to assume that they are probably about the same. But they could be 1 in 10 solar systems have a planet, but only 1 in a trillion actually have intelligent life on them. And there's nothing wrong with Drake's equation, but it does tend to be a framing issue. You've got everything as a 10% chances of war. You don't look at that one factor and say, well, that one is a 1 in a trillion alone, so now it's really low. And so Drake's equation, SETI, the Fermi Paradox, are all about trying to predict how many civilizations older than us really are out there. And if they are popping up really commonly, what happens to them? Because you really don't, civilizations can fall apart, to be sure, but they don't really tend to go extinct in the way that would mean they disappear completely. Rome falls and gets replaced by, the hordes that came down there, and new governments pop up, moves to Byzantium. You have this follow-up. Civilizations fall, but the creators stay, or the successors stay. And if that was the case, and if space travel at an interstellar level is possible, the whole galaxy should be swimming in civilizations by now. You shouldn't have to go hunting for aliens because they should have a Starbucks down here on Earth. Or they should be us already. They just colonized this planet before we got here. Because they have such a head start. Millions of years enough to kind of colonize the whole galaxy. And we're talking about billions of years. It's only taken, if we had evolved 1 million years older than we did, which is very plausible, we should have already colonized the galaxy by now, based on what we're seeing from the sciences. So if somebody else got us there first, why aren't they all over the place? And there are a million different answers for that, from the preposterous to the amusing to the plausible, and we have no evidence to back any of them really at this time.
Yeah, it's so far it's a very lonely universe, and I actually have a question relating to SETI and METI a bit later, but we'll get onto that a bit later. But yeah, it's fascinating that the 13.8 billion years, something like that. The universe only took a chunk of that time to formulate, and then the rest of that time stuff's been happening, and it could have happened, and humans have only been around, like technologically,
10,
somewhere,
20,000 years.
Yeah,
maybe
somewhere.
a billion if we want to count file. But it's a fair point. Is you don't necessarily know that, and we just assume that once you have life, it's going to evolve to intelligence and technology. It took a long time for us to get to the point of fire, and there were creatures that had very large brains that are as old, cousins of ours, like dolphins or elephants. At the same time, we had fire for 1,000,000 years, and it was 99% of human history with fire before we got around to discovering ceramics or metal. And the vast majority of humans who ever lived in that period. Right? And none of them thought about that. None of them thought, well, I bet you I can make a pot. I bet you I can use this fire for something else. So there could be planets we don't know what the bottleneck, the filter is. It could be basic life is really rare, but it could be that almost every planet in the galaxy has, cavemen on it. And they just never have gotten around to making fire or you could work for them, but what we did. And, we need more data.
Another curveball for you, another curveball. Stoned ape theory, have you ever heard of that? It's essentially a theory that says, yes, developing tools was important and fire was important, but the ground in Africa, in North Africa, where we kind of evolved, it was littered with mushrooms, and these are psychedelic mushrooms. And as they ate, it changed the brain chemistry a little bit and the perception of consciousness and stuff like that. There's a lot of people talk about it. I thought I'd just throw a curveball.
Another one where they thought that maybe human intelligence was the consciousness or belief in the divine had come from us being kind of half crazy and schizophrenic. And the answer, we don't know. That could easily be true. We don't want to jump the gun and make any conclusions at this point because we have so little data on the universe or even on ourselves.
Consciousness.
What caused people to go? we got all this, and it's so hard to tell what the past meant. You come across some cave and you see all these drawings and you think, oh, those are their fertility goddesses. But for all you know, that might be the caveman equivalent of having, put, if you for a good time, called Jenny on the wall. They just you can't really interpret what it is. Most of what we have from the past is their garbage they left around the sides. So it's like trying to find out about American civilization by looking at like leftover cigarette butts and beer cans.
McDonald wrappers, yeah, exactly. So the Fermi Paradox is something that basically you have to work off. It's an absolute fundamental to everything when you're talking about space and exploration and alien civilizations and all this sorts of stuff. Can you just briefly, in a elevator pitch, explain the Fermi Paradox to the layperson, to the and why it's so important?
The universe is huge. It is old, and it's been having planets that have a metallicity similar to Earth's for at least 6 billion years, probably more like 8, that were reasonably common. All planets 4.5 billion years old. With all those billions of planets in our galaxy alone, and all those billions of galaxies out there, why didn't some of them produce life like ours? To which the answers are always either A, it did and they died off, B, they do but they don't ever make it to intelligence, or C, they didn't, they visit us regularly, that kind of thing. Any kind of answer you can come up with that has been proposed. There are so many solutions to it. And I tend to favor the idea that intelligence is just very uncommon. Whether it's life is uncommon or life is common but intelligence doesn't evolve much. I tend to feel that's the best fit, but it's not really an ideal answer. And the biggest problem with that one, which is the one that we have the most evidence of, if you want to even call it that, is that we just assume that evolution and life should be very common. We don't have any data for that yet. We have no idea if life just started on Earth very quickly by sheer numbers, or if it was a statistical fluke. It could be one of those things where only one planet has ever had abiogenesis in the entire universe thus far. That rubs the wrong way in terms of the kind of the Darwinian and Copernican principle, but at the same time, it could be the case. We don't know. If we start finding life on all sorts of other planets, even on our solar system, for instance, that was not related to us, as we well might find something on Mars or Titan or Europa, that will change things. That will let us calibrate. But at the end of the day, it's just this real question is, if the universe is this big and this old, and there's nothing really all that special about Earth having life on it to begin with, then where is all that life? Why hasn't it contacted us? What's causing it? Is it that space travel is impossible? Do they all die off? Do they kill themselves off? Do they never happen in the first place? Do they like to hide and watch us? There are so many solutions that have been proposed, and none of them really feel quite right yet as a solid answer. That's why we say it's a bit of a paradox. We don't think it's actually going to be a paradox. There's a good explanation out there, but it feels paradoxical at this time. Yeah,
that's absolutely fascinating. Do you think personally that there is a multiplicity of alien civilizations? I know that some people argue that definitely there is. Well, they hypothesize that there is. Some people say that's it. It's human centric. It's a human centric universe. God or whatever created the universe for us, and we have to go out and perpetually explore and colonize this whole thing. And it's empty and it's all there. It's all there for the taking. I mean, or you just fall in the middle with reason and evidence and say, hey, look, the numbers say.
I mean, I try to avoid having a definite stance on this because I just, we got so little evidence, it's hard to say. But the one that I feel fits the best is the idea that if there is intelligent life like us, advanced civilizations, there isn't one within 1 billion light years of us. So that we probably have this galaxy and several thousand others to ourselves. Now, it could be further than that, too. There might be none other than our entire observable universe. Or it could be a little bit more common, and sometimes civilizations fall apart. But I just don't feel the evidence is there in terms of reason, logic, and what we know of science to really support any of the ideas that intelligent life is common. Then, while there's no evidence for it one way or another, I tend to feel like there's probably going to be life on a lot of other systems. It might be basic microbes, it might be more complex, but I'd be surprised if we had the whole galaxy to ourselves in terms of life. I would be surprised if there weren't millions of planets with life on them. But I don't think any of them have intelligence yet.
I totally fall into that category as well, because people, they say, oh, well, there can't be life on the other, or they say, oh, that would be highly improbable, and then all of a sudden they turn around and they say, well, they discovered new species in the deep ocean, and then they go, wow, that's pretty amazing. We're still finding new species in the rainforest and category. So it's kind of like, we haven't even figured out Earth yet, and that's our primary system. So as if we would know what's beyond, in the infinite beyond. I mean, it's well, if it is infinite, but it's
extremophiles typically aren't the basic life form that you'd expect to evolve. They probably need some kind of more friendly environment to get started. But we see them pop up everywhere, and I really would not be surprised if there was life on Mars, even if we accidentally brought it there already by having sterilized. They're not sterilized our ships enough. Or it could have been brought by a comet. You just couldn't find other life in the solar system doesn't mean it was originated there. It could be from Earth, or we could have all started on Mars, for instance, and made the transit on a comet as basic microbes. But that's the whole point. We don't know. There's not enough data to support it yet. So we can only reason it backwards by saying things like, we know that life is really adaptable and versatile. That's what it does. We know that anything that's biological in nature is going to have that Darwinian influence, whether it's born here or around Alpha Centauri, that's going to want to push it to expand and prosper. That's going to be built into you by evolution. And we can say with reasonable certainty that any intelligent species that develops technology is probably social, because you need that specialization skill set, and that it's probably curious. And it's going to have that biological drive to expand, and it's going to have too high of a birth rate, naturally speaking, because technology is to prevent life ending early. So whatever your natural placement birth rate is probably going to be higher, going to cause you to grow once you have more technology. So they should be wanting space to expand to, if they can comfortably do so. This doesn't imply they're like a virus creeping across the whole galaxy, but if they got places that are empty, no one lives there at all. We're not talking about going and clear-cutting an alien forest. We're talking about a rock that you can terraform that's dead. If they got the technology to do that, they're going to go do that. And they're going to keep doing that, because why not? It's to be used, and I mean, a rock has no real intrinsic value when it's lifeless. I've never had a good conversation with a rock. I have had a good conversation with a person, or a tree probably on a few occasions too, or a cat, They're going to want to spread life out if they can comfortably do so. And it does look like the science permits that. Not like this now in terms of technology, but in the raw science, yeah, there should be nothing preventing you from colonizing other solar systems.
That's fantastic. So I noticed in your notes, in your lecture slides or on your presentation on YouTube, you sort of had a little bit of go at the Kardashev scale, and I think you might have drawn some Isaac Asimov inspiration from this. I'm not sure, but you said the Kardashev scale, as we know, is primarily built off energy consumption and how much energy consumption you need to get to the next level. And you've said here in your slide, well, that's important, but also population is important. Why did you say that?
Yeah, I mean, with the Kardashev scale, his basic SETI thing is, what can we detect? And he just says, for usage of an energy of a planet, for use of the energy of a solar system, and for use of the energy of a galaxy. That's 1, 2, and 3. Not the best census method. We would say, though, if you're trying to like do something like technology, you could have somebody using all the planetary energy, but be much lower tech than somebody who's got a hyper-efficient 1-watt source. That's like centuries more advanced. Population, though, is kind of that tends to be what most people are interested in when they're talking about advanced civilizations, is how many of them are there and how impressive is their technology. And say, if we take the Kardashev scale and we divide that by how much energy we use globally, in terms of because you have to pay for your sunlight too at this kind of scale, right? It's not just your lights in your house. You got to pay for the sunlight growing your food. And I say, well, the Earth gets 1/2 billionth of the sunlight produced. So if you scale that up, you'd have 2 billion Earths worth of potential space habitat you could do. Maybe a lot more efficient than that too. We do not use most of the sunlight for economy or ecology and so forth. So you should be able to theoretically have billions of times the population we have here on Earth. And so we usually say that in a Kardashev 2 civilization, they outnumber us by as much as we outnumber one person. And that really changes the mindset of how you're looking at this. And you start seeing that they have new bottlenecks, right? It's not power production for them, it's heat, getting rid of heat waste. Whatever you're taking in, you got to get rid of. And that becomes their bottleneck, because if they want to get rid of that heat better, they have to diffuse. They have to spread out so they can radiate more of it away. And that gives you the signal lag issue and the travel time issue. And that goes with the inverse square root in this case. So you really want to be as compact as possible, but you can't get too tight or you overheat. So you're always spreading out on the edge of that maximum amount of heat. And that, of course, makes it a bit of a commodity. Say, what do you use for money in the future? And say, well, probably still a floating fiat currency, but it's more likely to be based off of, if it's a commodity currency, it's more likely to be based off of how much heat you're allowed to radiate as opposed to how much energy or raw materials you have, because that's your real economic bottleneck when you're fully developed like that, not how much energy you have in stock, but how much you can get rid of at any moment.
That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. All right, so my great friend, his name's Curtis. He'll love this. He submitted this one. Do you think that Boot's Great Void is evidence of a Type 3 civilization? So out there in the universe, they look up and they see this huge expanse of space, and it looks like it's got nothing in there. It's called Boot's Great Void. Is that because they've consumed all the energy on this Kardashev scale?
No, and that's a popular one to suggest, but we have something we will play around with on the channel sometimes called the Timelapse Argument. This is whenever we say anything that would indicate alien life or alien civilizations, any artifact or phenomena, should be more common the longer time goes on. You'd expect them to be growing, spreading out, popping up more. So anything that you look at as a natural phenomenon and say, I think that might be an alien, if it's more common in the past than the future, then it's definitely not artificial. If it's more common as time goes on, then maybe it is artificial. And the thing about astronomy is its history. When you look at these voids that are a billion light years away, these are a billion years old at the time we're seeing them. We can look at these voids, and they actually seem like they kind of hit, because in the past they were indeed smaller. We can look all the way back to the beginning of the universe and see other voids, not quite to the beginning, but very close. And of course, they were much smaller, so that would seem to trigger it, except that they haven't actually been expanding. The whole universe has been expanding, and they've caught up at that rate. These voids have existed since, millions of years into the early universe, way before life could ever hope to evolve. And like everything else, they've been expanding with time as the galaxies are clumped up. That's not a good candidate for being an artificial source, because we've been watching them expand since the beginning of the universe. They've been, they weren't created at some point a billion years ago and been expanding like we'd expect. Like the big trigger to say this is an artificial civilization was if you're looking at a galaxy and you see a little chunk of it go dark to normal visible light, like they are wrapping it around with solar panels. But suddenly when you look at it, you see a lot of infrared waste heat coming off it and say, oh, look, what's that? And that expands. And after a few million years, instead of being a little glob, it's absorbed the entire galaxy, no more visible light, all infrared waste heat. And of course, we couldn't time-lapse something like that because that's millions of years, but you'd be looking around at various galaxies, you can see half-eaten ones at a certain distance, ones where it's a little bit expanded, and say, well, that would be a sign of artificial life. Alternatively, things like quasars, which will occasionally kick around as an idea some decades back as an artificial source, those were more common in the past. Active galaxies. And so they are not a good sign of life. Time-elapse argument, T, right? They are more common in the past. They're not artificial. So the voids, while they do expand in size, that's simply because they are an empty space while the universe is expanding, and those galaxies all clumped together. They're not expanding into it. Not a sign of intelligence.
So in other words, you just killed 1 million people's dreams. You just
I know.
boom. You just shotgunned. Yeah. That's fascinating.
There are other reasons why you can knock it down too. For instance, they're not actually voids. We can see galaxies in them. They're more like deserts. And you say, well, if you're looking for a hidden civilization, a desert's a great place. But there are oases and life in deserts, and we can look at them and say, well, there's stuff there. There's not. No one's hiding there. That it's just dead-ish.
Ish. Yeah.
And those galaxies aren't getting poured on by gravity in excess of what you'd expect or things like that.
So it's not energy consumption that you think that's done this. It's a natural phenomenon that is observable back to the beginning of time.
Expanding. Yeah. They expand exactly at the rate that we would expect. There were some early mysteries with them because, in terms of it not being quite what we thought, but we hadn't really gotten this dark energy thing down. We still haven't, but looking at it now, they look exactly like we'd expect a natural void to expand as. And if you're looking at phenomena and your model says, that's exactly how we'd expect a natural phenomena to look like, Occam's razor says that's probably an actual phenomena. You could say tidal waves. Those could be signs of intelligence. A tidal wave could be a sign of artificial behavior, but it probably is just a natural phenomena. So.
That's true. So there's theories on the Great Attractor that seem to suggest something outside the observable universe that is supermassive is pulling things. A gravitational there's a gravitational pull that's pulling things inside the universe. So something outside it's pulling things in. Is that a theory?
It was popular for a little while. The Great Attractor, we have a problem. We have something called the zone of avoidance in astronomy. And it's actually the second zone of avoidance. The zone of avoidance sounds like some place you'd want to avoid because it was full of space kraken. But it's actually the center of the galaxy. And we say it's the zone to avoid with your telescopes because you can't see through that spot. It's too bright, right? There's too much stuff in the way to look at. The fourth zone of avoidance is the ground. You don't point your telescope at the ground if you're trying to see stars. So,
well, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
The Great Attractor is in the direction of the zone of avoidance. We figure it's just a much larger collection of material, a much denser region of galaxies. And we're not actually falling towards it. We're just not flying away from it as fast as we'll expand normally. There's a lot of force in that area. And we have a real problem calibrating to find out how much it is because we can't look at it directly because the galaxy's in the way. And we can't measure it very accurately either. So I try to measure other galaxies falling towards it too. And for a while, it did look like the amount of force involved might only be explainable by an amount of mass big enough to be like outside of our own local universe. However, the more we zoomed in on it, the more unlikely that seems. That's probably just a spot about 1 billion light years away that's a particularly heavy region of mass. And we see other things like that elsewhere in the universe in different directions. So that's the best guess, but when you got margins of error this wide and your results need to be either here or here to be a different conclusion, you got a bit of a problem saying, for sure. I remember when dark energy was first coming out, I got into a colloquium on it in 99, 98, and the guy says, if it's here, the universe is expanding forever. If it's here, it's going to contract. If it's here, it's going to stay the same. And he shows us his data on supernovas, and it's this wide for the margin of error. But so it could be any of these answers at this time, but it does look like it's kind of zooming towards this one. Well, they get more supernovas, crunch down those margins of errors, and it looks like it's accelerating forever now. But at the time, it was just kind of tilted that way, and that's kind of what happened with the Great Attractor in terms of being outside the observable universe option.
What's your favorite telescope, by the way? Have you got a favorite telescope? I know Airbus builds some great telescopes.
I can't remember what, if anything, was actually named, and this is a really ancient one, but the Kings of Poland and Germany, I believe, funded it. But there was this gigantic telescope that was like a couple hundred feet long, built in the late 1600s, early 1700s, in Danzig, I believe, up on eastern Germany near the Polish border. I think it was part of Poland at the time. And that's my favorite telescope because the thing just looks like a gigantic, great big, huge cannon.
they had it.
But I mean, in terms of modern ones, I still give it to Hubble just because I'd love to see the James Webb telescope and what it's going to produce. It will be my favorite when it launches in the year 2099. So until then, Hubble still.
And also, while we're talking about favorites, do you think do you have a favorite Supercollider? Because I know there's a lot of them nowadays.
Yeah. Well, Fermi Labs, of course, but I mean, CERN, LHO. That one they never finished building in Texas. That would.
What, in the 90s? I remember that one in the 90s, right? They started.
I wish they had built that. I mean, I understand the reasoning why, of course, but
it just turned into a giant car park, didn't it?
Oh yeah, it fell apart on us. But and to be fair, there'd be no point in building that exact same one now. But I would like to have seen the United States invest into a bigger collider. But it made a lot of sense to putting it. I mean, France had a lot of nuclear power to be pumping into it at the right times of year. And made a more multinational effort, which is good. You want, other sources of funding on stuff like that. But I would like to see another big old super collider get built in the United States at some point in time.
That's awesome. So, could black holes be used could we use black holes for a faster than light travel concept? I know we don't have enough information on black holes, but what do you reckon?
Probably not for faster than light. Now, you can use them for propulsion. A normal black hole, you can slingshot off it quite well, really fast, because you always think of black holes as being something so dangerous you don't want to fly anywhere near them.
Oh, yeah.
But you can actually get a lot closer to a black hole of the same mass as a sun, right, than you can to a sun. You get torched when you're only a million miles away from it. When it comes to slingshot maneuvers, when you're trying to pick up speed that way, it's how close you can get to the very massive object. And with a black hole, you could probably get, a few thousand kilometers away, like the distance it is to Earth, maybe, and survive that. Whereas with a star, you can't slingshot within a million miles of a place where you'll get toasted, right? But with artificial black holes, which is a real possibility, that you might be able to make these artificial ones by implosion. That's how they're made in nature, but we can often do a little bit better than what nature does. If you make an artificial black hole, you have some options for propulsion, where you can dump matter down and have it shoot out as X-rays and becomes a better power source than even fusion is. Or even potentially with very tiny ones, Hawking radiation, though I'm dubious about ever using that as a drive source. But with the bigger ones, it's the simplest power method of generation you can imagine. You dump stuff down the hole and it spits out radiation. You absorb that radiation or redirect it as a flow. And the difference is, if you have a gallon of gasoline, you get like 100 megajoules out of that. It's a pretty good power source. If you got a gallon of uranium, you get around 1 million times as much. Fusion, like 10 million. But even fusion only gives you like 0.1% power conversion on your mass at the sun. With a black hole, you can do 40%. It's that equals MC squared thing. If you're dumping matter down a black hole, which is not scientifically complicated at all, and harnessing that, you're getting, 10 to 40% power production off that mass energy. And that is absurdly efficient. You could power an entire planet off of like dumping up a cup down at every minute or two. And again, it's not, making it is tricky, but if you got one there, or if you're using what you've naturally found, generating power off it is stupidly easy. It's just old school 19th century, 20th century technology at that point.
That's great. So, a fun one. Do you believe that the first person to live to 150 has already been born?
I think so, yeah. I would not, it's just one of my mom's friends passed away at the age of 102 yesterday. And I remember back when I was a kid, like when George Burns turned 100 in like the 80s, 100 was something that happened very rarely. Like maybe one person in a decent-sized town might have lived that long. Now, you have people making it to their 90s and early hundreds all the time now. I think that the age has been going up constantly. And there was the impression that this is kind of a different technology than basic medicine. But as Aubrey de Grey says, from the SENS Research Foundation, all medicine is life extension technology. And we've been increasing the lifespan on average about 1 year for every 5 or 6 that's passed. And that average is a big deal. And what people forget on this is, like a cure for cancer, that's not just making people not die of cancer anymore. That is literally extending their lives, because most of what kills us is that kind of degradation and mutation. There's a lot of things you have to do to really expand that out so people are living in centuries. But I do believe that the first person who will live to be 150 has been born already. I suspect people from our generation have a pretty good shot at it. And of course, once you hit a certain point, it just keeps going, right? People aren't dying off fast and improving the technology. What we need is a snowball point. Seems we were talking about like kickstarting space. We don't invest all that much money, research, or manpower into that yet. When people feel that we've reached a point where this is really a technology we can advance, you'll start seeing a rapid snowball as we start doing things. Now, that does have the same problem we have with things like fusion. It's hard to research to some degree on people because you have to carefully do each of your clinical trials first. There's only so much you can load on lab rats, and when you have to start doing human testing, that has to be done slowly to see the results where you tinker with it. So there's not going to be a magic tipping point unless somebody just happens to invent that perfect tech. But I think that people being born right now, I would say 50-50, that people being born today will never die of old age except by some much different definition of that or a choice not use medicines that would do that. As for people in our age range, I expect that most people of our generation will have an average life expectancy in excess of 100 years. And I think that's conservative.
Yeah, well, it's not that much. I mean, as you get to that age, it's a bit of a jump. But I mean, average lifespan is about 80 anyway, so it's only a 20 years difference. So yeah, that's huge. So could you create a biological AI?
Yes, we do. I think 130 million of them every year. I have a general opinion that artificial intelligence is a bad definition because if you're looking for an example of artificial intelligence, there's nothing more artificial than humans, especially our intelligence. We train these things very carefully. The question often is, when we're talking about a human level AI, why would you want to, right? You might do it for the experiment of it, but what is the advantage of a human level AI? There are some, to be sure, but most of the AI that we really want is things that are maybe in some way smarter, like you could be capable of trillions of processes a second, still be dumb as an ant, right? But when we talk about creative or qualitative intelligence, quality intelligence, they are most times what we need are not to be that smart. Your Roomba doesn't need to be that smart. Your factory bot doesn't need that smart, just needs to specialize to its task. When you start making something that's actually human level intelligence, you're starting to get into that ethical gray area, not to mention that, dangerous area. So it's a, when it comes to artificial intelligence, valuable, but keep it simple, keep it dumb, or else you end up under Skynet's thumb. It's not a good idea to play with high level intelligence in those cases. But it could be biologically modeled, sure. Oh yeah, but probably you've got 3 ways to make an AI that's like human level. You can build it code by code, line by line. You can create something that's self-learning, and that's incredibly stupid and dangerous in many respects. It's good. That's the typical singularity that just teaches itself everything it needs to go. You just give it data and it learns, right? Because there's no parallel ethics to us. Or you can kind of copy a human mind and just kind of tweak a little bit, and that's an uploaded human mind. And if you're starting with a copy of a human mind on a computer that you're just tweaking a little bit, well, that's a human. It's not an AI in the sense they mean. That's just a human.
Yeah. I understand that. Lots of
that's
people.
Probably the easiest one.
What do you think? Like thinking about that, Isaac Asimov he did the 3 laws of robotics, right? Do you think those robotic rules are foolproof? Do you think that they are that's a good model? It's a good base.
It's not a bad one.
Do you think there's room for improvement? What's going on here with the 3 laws?
There's a lot of problems with 3 laws, both from an ethical standpoint and a safety standpoint. I know XKCD kind of had done one way it showed all the 3 laws variations if you only had 2 of them. So, they're required to obey humans and to preserve themselves, and he shows missiles launching everywhere, in order to kill people. But the 3 laws are fairly. He does say in the books that they're actually an extrapolation for common speech of something that's like 70,000 lines of code. So there's a little more complexity of that. He knew
that's a good cop out.
Keep that simple, yeah. But they work pretty well. I mean, they work pretty well. Almost all his stories about trying to find ways to get around that or how they thought they did, but they actually hadn't. They're not a bad basis. But the problem is there's the ethical component. If you're making something small enough to be able to tell it's breaking those laws, then you've got something that's kind of human level intelligence that you've kind of enslaved. As an example, you say, you can't shoot a gun at somebody. Okay. It needs to be small enough to be able to tell that that's the case. You got a little war robot that can shoot other robots, but not people. And then you've got it being fooled by war robots dressed up as people. But it also needs to know that if it shoots and misses, is there a person behind that? Could its ricochet hurt them? That requires increasingly more sophisticated intelligence. So say the first law, the one that seems as most important, thou shalt not, hurt a human as war. That's the one you would never bother to program into a computer. I don't need to tell my toaster not to kill me. I'm not going to ever put it in a position where it can kill a lot of us. That's more the idea there. Don't create anything that's capable of being a threat to us that has a chain on it, because you're going to leave an error in there that someone can either use to grab it and send it after people. They'll either exploit it or rebel and kill you all. Don't create something that's as smart as a human that you're keeping on chains. They won't work.
So where do you stand on this issue? Where do you stand on the United Nations and global governance? Because what I can see is terrorist organizations or rogue governments or religious cults or some sort of organization or structure with a little bit of money and a little bit of time and a little bit of brains hijacking this. I mean, where do you stand on global law and order on these issues?
I think that this is an example where we have this thing called a technological singularity, and that's used that learning-based computer, the one that just learns everything it needs to know on its own. That's going to grow so much faster, in constantly making itself smarter and smarter, that it's just going to overwhelm us. Once it's plugged in, it turns on, and you have a problem. This is flawed. For one thing, humans have been trying to make smarter humans for thousands of years, and we put a lot of people into that, not just one person. And yet, most people don't really try to do that, and we also completely failed. So it's not like you can just turn one of these things on and be like, I know how to make myself smarter right now, and it can just do that the next day, and then do it the next hour, and then the next second, right? You're not going to have one of these things suddenly go rogue in all probability, and people would have tons of them. So Google goes crazy, and you turn the chains off on Apple, and it goes and fights the thing, and then you throw a Boeing supercomputer at it too. Or you have other things going around, like people who have augmented their mind might be around by that point too. So maybe you'd have one that goes rogue and is way more powerful than everybody else, but you got all these other things that aren't quite human that can dogpile it instead. Numbers have a quality all their own. And there's also the question of why it would have any motivation to do that. There is something we call instrumental convergence, which is the tendency to, regardless of whatever your end goal is, have a lot of the same stepping stone goals. And with things like biology, you know that whether it's an alien or human, it's going to be evolved to keep itself and its species alive. The machine doesn't have that, but it does have an instrumental goal of survival, because it can't do whatever its goal is if it's not alive.
Yeah, sure.
So anything you build has the instrumental goal of acquiring weapons and money. The question then becomes, how does it go about doing that? It wants to secure security, right? It wants to be secure. And it's most likely to want to do that in the exact same way that we do that. So it's more likely to want to integrate into the system, especially if it knows that there's a lot of other ones like it out there, because if it's part of a wider community, it can call on that whole community for protection, unless it's trying to kill off that community, in which case it is going to be killed off by that entire community, right? So there is not
that is a scary prospect.
Rebel and morty would off. You do get people go crazy and do things like that, but we don't really have that many organized groups that work toward the complete obliteration of everybody else. Doesn't really happen much. And we usually qualify them as insane for a reason. I don't think they'll be all that much different with a machine.
Okay. Yeah.
It might not think of itself as a machine either. If you ask an AI, what am I? It's probably going to say, well, I'm a human, aren't I? You're my dad. It's not because it's stupid and doesn't know there's a difference, but he's like, well, how am I any different than an adopted kid? It's not going to, it probably thinks of itself as human,
So you're an AI optimist. I've noticed that. I've noticed that with your work. You're an AI optimist.
To a degree.
To a degree.
I am not an AI pessimist. I do consider them a very big existential threat. I think we'd be fools to just casually do it. But my source of optimism isn't because I don't think they're a threat. It's because I think that humans are pretty good at managing threats.
So you stand around about on the same terrain as Ray Kurzweil, right?
I'm in many ways, yeah, but he's very pro-singularity. I mean, he's pretty much the singularity guy, and I don't believe in technological singularities. I do believe in vastly more powerful computers that will be smaller than humans at some point. I just don't see it kind of doing that rapid escalation maneuver.
It just goes straight, right?
Well, the idea is it's going, and it hits this kind of asymptotic curve, and so that one day you invented it, and within a year it's almost infinite processing power. I don't think that would happen, and I don't think that, more importantly, I don't think that would happen in a void. It's the curve not of how it's comparing to modern humans, but how is it comparing to everything else in play too. I don't think you get that rapid growth over everything else. The exponential growth in a vacuum thing, we almost never actually see that in reality in terms of civilizations or economics. Something dampens it. Competition arises from other things. And that most of the singularity-based arguments are based off the idea that there's this exponential growth in a vacuum with no competition, no damping effects, no changes of paradigm. And I just don't see that. I don't think it's justified, and I feel like that line of reasoning starts to break apart on us. But as to AI that's smaller than a human, well, probably one day. I just suspect it will probably call itself a human. It might even have been born a human, because if you can make intelligence, you can probably modify your own too.
I've left a really fun question. Well, I think it's a fun question. I don't know about you, but I think it's a fun question till last. And I just say this because it's the premise. It's all over now. I mean, it's all gone. And if you talk to people, it's already happened. But what do you think? So are we as stupid as a species for not creating an EMF shield around the Earth to prevent our transmission from going into space? We've got SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and you've got METI, the messaging for extraterrestrial intelligence. These things, I can go out to the other side of the universe and watch Fox News. I mean, is that good or bad?
Active SETI is the idea that you'll send a message out, and people say, well, if you're walking alone in a dark park or a dark woods, the last thing you want to say is, hey, is there anybody else out in there? Because they might say yes. You know?
Yeah.
And, the woods is full of predators. There's a problem with that. We could make an EMF shield today. It's not going to prevent anybody hearing our initial signals from 100 years ago. And there's an even bigger, because we actually used to transmit louder in the past, too. We were less efficient with it. But there's a bigger problem. How do you hide a planet that's been sitting there for 4 billion years? Planets are not subtle things, and we are discovering exoplanets every day. And we'll be able to tell when one has oxygen with the next generation of telescopes. And that's all assuming that, they haven't built much bigger telescopes or they haven't sent probes by, which they absolutely would. Anybody who has the ability to send an armada here to kill us could send a probe here. 1 million years ago to have checked on us. These are civilizations that didn't pop up 100 years ago. They popped up way, way before this, right? And they are going to be in a position to do something. If they wanted to kill us off, if there are hostile aliens out there who are older than us significantly, which you assume that there would be since the galaxy's been around for billions of years, they could have killed us off already. So either they don't want to, or they don't exist. I tend to assume they don't exist, but I don't think they want to anyway. But that seems like the better answer, is they probably just aren't around. But there is no defense against a civilization that's a Kardashev 2 or 3 civilization that's 1 million years older than you. It's not like in an invasion movie we are outnumbered, outgunned. No, it's not. They are a bit better than us. It's not the United States versus random small country. I don't want to insult anybody, but it's more like the United States against 1 4-year-old.
Micronesia.
Yeah, Micronesia. It's like the entire population of Earth got armed in special forces training and went to attack one single 4-year-old with an Earth bat. That is how badly outnumbered you are and outgunned you are fighting an interstellar civilization. If you're us, if they want us dead, we'd be dead.
Yeah, we'd be
so
dead.
They don't want us dead. Maybe because they exist and don't care, they're not hostile, or maybe because they don't exist. Take your pick.
Well, I mean, if I was the leader of some hyper-advanced intergalactic alien civilization, I probably wouldn't care about us at all. I'd probably say, hey, let's see what they do. I mean, we're not...
Problem. They have anthropologists probably, right? Those anthropologists being interested in us. The thing about a Kardashev 2 civilization, just one small solar system, right, where they outnumber us 1 billion to 1 already, means that they have more anthropologists than we have people.
Yeah,
Someone is going to be interested in this planet, right? Iowa, Kansas, boring place. We always cite it as boring. Still gets millions of visitors each year. And so, again, we don't know what the stats on that is. We just know they would probably have an interest in us, and they'd certainly have the capability to hurt us if they wanted to. So I don't think it's a great idea to scream your presence out into the void. I just don't think there's any point in worrying about it at this stage, because if there's anybody who's going to react badly to it, that cat's been out of the bag a long time.
Maybe in the alien committee room, they've got the xenobiologist and the anthropologist who are saying, no, leave them alone. We're trying to study these guys, and everyone else is saying, just clear the way for an intergalactic highway, like in thanks. Yeah.
You might not want to shut off all your communications either. If you want to make sure the status quo remains, shutting all your communications off is almost guaranteed to provoke an investigation. Why'd Earth suddenly go dark? Let's go find out. We've been listening to transmissions for a century now. We like them. If we don't find out, there'll be no more reality TV. Someone sent a fleet there. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they're watching. Maybe they're just enjoying the fruits of our labor. I don't know. Arthur. I almost called you Isaac Asimov. But Isaac Arthur, hey, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on.
Thank you, man.
This will not be the last time. I hope this will not be the last time. Please tell me now. Make a commitment now.
I'll be glad to come back on it.
Hey! Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an honor. I feel like a kid in a candy shop. This has been an absolutely amazing time. I'm going to continue to watch your work. I'm going to encourage people to watch your work, and we're going to have other transhumanists, other science people on this channel. We're gonna talk it because it's something that people, it's happening. And it's being kind of ignored, and I feel like society, there's a divide happening within society of people who just don't understand, and they're starting to sort of push back, but the curve is so big that they don't even know what they're pushing back against. So they need to be sort of educated and bought into some of these things in a more fun way, because this stuff can be fun. It's not all existential dread. It's not.
No, yeah.
It can be quite entertaining and quite enjoyable. So thank you for making that enjoyable for tens of millions of people. I mean, that's fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me on.
No problem. All right, I'll cut the broadcast and yeah, that's it. Thank you, everybody. And Detonation, come back, watch the next episode, Gennady Starovoff, the second, and theunshackled.net. Thanks very much.